change. Investors are rapidly buying into sub-Saharan Africa's real estate sector. Warren Schultze, who's CEO of Eris Property Group, he joins us now. Good morning to you, Warren. I was at the IPD conference a month or two ago, and I remember that conference several years ago. There was no interest in the African continent. Now, this year's conference, there's a lot of talk about Africa. The point was made that real estate investors tend to follow other businesses. So you've got big retailers, for example, and then you get other property people following. Is that a very simplistic view of it? And where is our real estate investment in Africa?
Yeah, David, that is correct. Africa, it's commonly accepted that Africa is growing fast. Some of these economies have had a GDP growth of 7% odd for the last couple of years, and people who go in and out of these African capitals can see that. There's dramatic changes on the real estate front, and that creates opportunities for new real estate. There's a shortage of quality office accommodation, shortage of retail space, and people are seeing that and investing, and it's a trend that started probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's picked up from there.
Yeah. Warren, how do I invest in African real estate? What are my options?
To me, the structure of these funds is generally in a vehicle, often a Mauritian-based vehicle, and that gives the ability of South African investors to participate in these funds as well as overseas investors. It just is a more flexible type of vehicle, and bearing in mind that these funds are investing in different jurisdictions. The Mauritian tax structures are designed to give you flexibility, and that's why most of them are set up there. So the result is that South African investors can invest as well as overseas investors, and it's people who want a piece of the African growth. Real estate is sometimes a less risky investment than operating businesses, and they invest in these funds because people are out there with, say, property skills as opposed to trying to do it themselves.
You still have to know your way around. Now, obviously, you've been active in this market. What are some of the things you've learned?
One of the most important things is that we take on local partners, because the land issues in Africa, sometimes the dynamics of getting these developments done, the planning regulations, sometimes a little bit difficult and things you don't see coming. So we take on an established local partner, often with some capital, an institutional partner if we can, and we found we've been successful on that basis. Other things are there's a fair spread in rentals that you can achieve in these places because of the shortage. And just by way of example, in one of the corporate offices that we've done here, we're achieving net rentals to the landlord equivalent of about $16. And in a place like Kigali, where we're busy with a project now, because of the shortage, people will pay you up to $25. So there's quite a disparity in rental levels by virtue of the shortage. And similarly with retailers, because they get access to new markets, and they are big markets.
It sounds like, it sounds like there are better returns to be had than in South Africa, where we have quite a mature and hotly contested market.
That's very definitely the case. If you look at our stats, we've had an average, if you look at the IPD index, which you mentioned earlier, about 17.5% composite growth for the last 10 years. But really, off these keenly priced property prices on the JSE, it may be difficult to get those returns if you look forward. But certainly in Africa, people are achieving them, and if you model the numbers, they're achievable. So there are superior returns available.
Warren, you say that you go in with a local partner. You're obviously trying to circumvent some of these challenges, but in Africa at the moment, what's topical has been the Ebola virus, the security issues. Does that at all play a role when it comes to investing in the property market?
It does play a role in people's minds. We've recently completed a roadshow for our fund, and when you talk to investors, they ask these questions. But I think if one explains them a little bit more deeply, Ebola has been something that's been around since 1976. It comes sporadically, and fortunately it's been able to be contained. Hopefully that'll be the case here as well. Terrorism, same story, it's sporadic. But in between that, there's 1 billion people in Africa that need to get on with their lives. They need to shop, they need to carry on businesses, and there's long-established, well-established corporates who need accommodation, and people that frequent retail centres, irrespective of these things. So life carries on, as it were.
Look, talking about Ebola, we've made the point on this show, Ebola is a terrible thing and you've got to be very careful with it, but malaria kills a lot more people than Ebola ever will in the continent. So now there are issues, you're moving into a country, everywhere's different, there's no such thing as Africa, there are lots of African countries. Where are the places that are friendliest to the kind of investment that you're talking about? Not just in terms of attitudes, but in terms of environment.
The one common thing about Africans is they are passionate about improving themselves and Africa in general. So we are welcomed in places where we go, where we can try and improve people's lives. But Botswana is a wonderful place to do business. We've had some successes there. Ghana is also fantastic. We're finding our way in Mozambique as well. We have a wonderful opportunity in Kigali. I'm not sure if you've been to Rwanda lately, but Kigali is a fantastic city. So these cities are great places, and the people are very friendly and have high aspirations. So it's generally a pleasant experience.
There's always a question of east versus west. You're talking about Nigeria, you mentioned Ghana being in the west, but Rwanda being in the east. What about places like your DRC or your South Sudan or Egypt? There's been a lot of attention on Egypt lately. It's been performing very well. Does that ever come up at all?
Most corporates who start to look at Africa develop a matrix, and they evaluate the different economies and jurisdictions based on infrastructure, based on political stability and so on. And those countries that you mentioned are slightly lower down on the rung of targets in most cases. We know people that are doing business successfully there, but we've constrained ourselves, especially because it's a new fund. So we're looking at the more or the areas that are regarded as less risky, and we also look at areas where we have networks and people that we're associated with in South Africa that can introduce us to people which we're comfortable with, and that's generally in those areas because they're English speaking in the main.
Thank you so much, Warren, for taking us through that. That was Warren Schultze. He's the CEO of Eris Property Group.